This is your host, ChukwumaijemNwosu. And today we're going to start off with paying some bills. So today's sponsor is my humble self, and this is talking about logistics. Do you need to move a car from state A to state B? Do you need to move a car within the city from zip code A to zip code B? Do you have mechanical issues? Do you have cars that need to be fixed? Do you have cars that are involved in an accident and you need body work? Contact me. I have my Instagram down in the description after the show, and you can message me and I could help find a solution to most of your logistic, mechanical bodywork problem. Do you need to buy a car? Do you need to get it at wholesale prices? Contact me. Leave a comment in the comment section, DM me on Instagram, and we could take it from there. Okay? So today we're going to be talking about money, right? We're going to be talking about why it's better to make money than having a job. Is making money better than a job? Well, let's see. We're gonna go back in time, right? We're gonna go back in time uh, in my early childhood, my first initial interaction with money. So my first initial interaction with money was none, because first of all, I had uncles. They spent money. They sent me to the store. I grew up in Nigeria. If you watch my previous video, you should know by now. They sent me to the store, go buy a cigarette, go buy beer, alcohol, go buy stuff. So, by the way, Nigeria of in the 80s was crazy because it was under a military dictatorship. So, yes, as a 4-year old, I could be sent to the store to pick up a packet of cigarettes, and yes, the store assistant or the store clerk would sell me the cigarette, and I could be sent to buy a bottle of beer, and they would sell it to me. So those were some of my early interactions with money. And other than the fact that my parents used to give me, you know, chump change here and there, and I have uncles that will come over and give me money, and that money was immediately handed over to my parents, right? So then, in the Nigerian family, they had a thing where like they don't want kids having a lot of money because it would spoil them. So my dad was a hustler. My dad was a businessman. My dad was a go-getter. So at first, my dad went to London and got his certification in pharmaceutical sales, which was the motivation to push me into pharmacy, which I went to UIC for. Um, so my dad went to London, got there, and came back. And before that, he had other jobs that involved insurance and so many other things. But when he had to work for Upjohn, they sent him to London to go get this certification, and then he came back to Nigeria and became a pharmaceutical sales rep. So that was my dad's, earning. That was what he was doing. That was lucrative. That was his earning potential as a pharmaceutical sales rep. He made a living. And then on my mom's side, when my dad met my mom, she went to catering school, and she ended up becoming a catering a catering agent, or would you call it a chef? So she was working at, I remember back then she was working at a hotel called Travelers Hotel. I loved going to work with my mom because my mom would make all this food and I get to try all of it. So then my mom didn't necessarily have to hand me money. So it was based on as needed. Whatever I wanted, she paid for. And my interaction with money was very limited. My dad had a job, my mom had a job. So fast forward to 1988, there was a military coup, and then it was an also unsuccessful coup, and the Nigerian economy went into crisis. So my dad had to leave the country, came to the United States. Now, my mom still had a job. My mom, kept working her job at Travelers Hotel. Um, then I started something called nursery school. I guess over here they call it Montessori, and in the UK they also call it Montessori. So I never wanted to go to school. I hated school. I loved my family. I loved my uncles. I loved my mom. I loved everybody. I wanted to be around them all the time. But for some reason, it convinced me that there's this thing I have to go to. It's a class, and I'm going to meet a bunch of other kids in the same classroom. And for some reason, I'm going to like it, and it's instrumental to my future. Hmm, not. That was not true. The school is not instrumental to your future. You don't need school to succeed in life. I found out later in life. Anyways, my mom made sure I went. She would leave instructions that whenever I went to school, when she went to work, by the time she comes back from work, I should have a certain amount of tasks accomplished by the time she returns from work. And when I didn't have it accomplished, there were consequences. So then I learned the responsibility and accountability. So I learned very fast that there were consequences to my action. So I was careful on the kind of actions that I took. So now my mom was earning, my dad was abroad, trying to find his way in life as a man. My dad was 26 years old. My mom was 26 years old, I've come to find out. And my mom was bringing in whatever little money she could. At that point, we were owing the landlord for rent. I got to find this out later in life. When my dad left the country, the landlord had let us move into his building for free, pending payment, which my dad promised to pay, which after my dad left the country and came to the United States, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, my dad paid the rent in full. So my interaction with money at this point was still very minimal. It was just handling money from people that just wanted me to do store runs for them. So I never really got touch cash. And most people that surrounded me, they were not very big money people. They didn't have jobs. They were hustlers. They were people that went and made ends meet. Some of them owned, transport companies. Some of them were just guys that owned like stores in the market. They were basically what you would see here in the malls. The guys that stay in the mall hallway. Those guys right there. They had their little kiosk. Those were these guys. These guys had like little stalls in the marketplace, and they sold fabrics and sold different kind of stuff. Some of them sold electronics. So they never. Nigeria was a place where people never really had jobs. Like the people that had jobs were considered like middle class. There were people that wouldn't live in a neighborhood like mine, right? Most people that lived in the neighborhood that I lived in then were businessmen, masters of their own destiny. I remember then we had a family friend. He owned a company called Idemili Farms. Rest in peace, Mr. Okenwa. I just heard lately that he's passed away. He had a poultry farm. This guy was a multi-millionaire. He was driving a Range Rover. He had a Forerunner then. He had a six-story building. He had so many businesses that were cash flowing. Just from his poultry farm alone, he had an egg store, like a poultry store where he sold chickens and eggs and all kinds of stuff. He later turned it into. He became a magnet. He was started selling gas, natural gas, kerosene, all kinds of stuff. Bought a truck, trailer, and went big. And then in the main market, he also had a store where he sold other things too, like different ceramics, and he was just multifaceted. So this guy was, I'm giving you just the step by step. I'm trying to give you the lead up to my interaction with money. So then they had somebody. This guy was one of the richest people I knew at that time. He was my dad's friend, very good guy. Took very good care of our family. We got free eggs all the time. We got so many chicken, all kinds of stuff from him. He gave us so much free stuff that I didn't even understand the value of what we're getting from him at that point or what he was giving us for free. Very good friend, family friend. So fast forward to me, being friends with his family, getting to see how they lived. He lived in a penthouse. He had his own section. The rest of the family had his own section. He was married, but he liked having his own part of the house. So his wife stayed in her part, and he stayed in his part. And everybody came over to his side when there was a special occasion, or when he wanted to, or, just the wife came over there. They tried to keep the kids away from his penthouse. So eventually, we moved from that city to a different city. And then I got older, and then I got into something called elementary school, right? So when I got into elementary school, my interaction with money went up a notch, right? Because at this point, as far as money goes, I was um, I was beginning to get cash from my mom. She would give me cash at this point because I had to go to school. And when I went to school, I was given snacks in the morning. But after school, we had these guys on bicycles that would pedal ice cream everywhere. And they would come with the ice cream like basically bicycle cooler is basically like a ice cream cooler on wheels, right? Mind you, these guys were entrepreneurs, what you would call an entrepreneur in the United States. They were working for themselves. So they went to all these ice cream factories, bought as much ice cream as they could afford with the money they had, and they would put it into this this cooler that was placed inside a bucket that was hanging off the front of a bicycle. So they would come to the fence of our school and they would sell all these really, now I've come to find out very dangerous and sugary and not very healthy frozen products to us. They would call it ice cream. So they had yogurt, they had banana flavor, they had all kind of stuff. So the only people that could afford to get involved or deal were kids that had cash. So my mom gave me money when she could afford to, and some of my family friends, they bought stuff, and we got to share when they could afford to share. So at that point, my dad started sending back money from the United States, and eventually, we got to a point where my mom could afford to give me more. So one of my most memorable interaction with money was one time when my mom was riding in the car with a family friend, and I think she had run out of money. So as a kid, I wasn't understanding what was going on. Money management and mismanagement and all that kind of stuff. I was still getting little concepts about it. So she had asked her friend, which was our family friend, which was our landlord, for some cash. And the landlord quickly, the lady quickly declined that she doesn't have any. This was a very rich lady. Of course, she had the money, but I guess she just didn't want to loan it to my mom. And I found that very intriguing because I was sitting in the backseat of a car and as a kid and I was making all these calculations. I was like, that's your friend. She didn't even ask you for a lot of money. Why wouldn't you make it available to her? Eventually I will learn to understand how the rich people think. So I was just sitting there, I was wondering, like she's not asking her for money to go to the club or party. Like she really needed the money. My mom was the kind of woman she would never ask for something that she didn't need. So this lady declined her, and at that point, I just went in my brain and just said, note to self, never depend on anybody. And the day went on, and eventually my mom, somehow, some way, figured out her problems, with cash flow and solved that. I believe my dad sent money or something like that. So eventually, one time, my dad came back to the United States. This was my first major interaction with money. So my dad came back to the United States. When my dad comes back to the United States, he usually has a lot of dollars, dollar bills. And there was this guy. He's just like an area boy. He's like a thug. Like he's like the average Pookie or Ray Ray you would see, around the neighborhood in the United States. He was just a thug. He hung out with the bad kids. He was a bad kid himself. He was one of these kids that their parents like has a father that was busy and didn't look after the family and had a mother that was not around, and nobody was really there to look after the family's affairs. And because of that, people went, kids did not perform at optimum levels. So the streets crept in and bad values and attributes, and basically the kid became basically like a societal deviant. He would steal, he would pilfer, he would do all kinds of stuff just to make ends meet. And sometimes just kids rebelling, but that rebelliousness turns into something bigger. So on one occasion, this kid called me up because my parents tried to shield me from the street life. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to go interact with people. I wanted to have my own experience. I didn't want to depend on anybody. Remember, I noted to myself when my mom had asked that lady for money and the lady, which was her friend, declined. I didn't want to depend on anybody. I started learning quickly about independence. So at that point, I talked to the guy. I was just trying to see what the street kids was about. I wasn't trying to be a bad boy or go kill anybody or do anything stupid. I just wanted to be out there on the street. I just wanted to be in public. I wanted to understand what was going on with society. I wanted to know what life was like outside of my parents, being in their care. I wanted to be exposed. I wanted to see other side of life. I wanted to see how people that were less fortunate than me lived, and anybody I could interact with. I was a kid. My brain was a sponge. I was just trying to soak in as much information as possible. So what ended up happening was that This guy on one occasion called me up and told me, "Hey, you know your dad just came back from the United States, right? There's something called dollars, right? He keeps it in his briefcase. If you could just get me one, right? We could change it. We could go spend a lot of money. We could go do a lot of fun things, right?" So at this point, this was my introduction to myself. This was me getting to know myself. This was when self-awareness started to hit me. I At that point I realized how far I've come and how not so gullible I am. So at that point, he told me to go steal that money. So I thought about it. I was like, okay, no problem. I'll go get it. So I went over to the house. I thought about it. I was like, why would I steal my parents' money and go give it to a stranger? So I devised a method that was going to work in my favor, but to his dismay. So what did I do? We had a Monopoly box, right? And if you know anything about Monopoly, it has dollars that you use to play. So what I did is I went into the Monopoly box and I grabbed either a $20 bill or a Monopoly bill or $100 Monopoly bill. I can't remember which one I grabbed, but I grabbed the bill and I stuffed it in my pocket and I walked out to him and I told him, yes, I did it. I got it. And then I handed it to him and then he looked at it and he looked at the innocence in my face, me thinking I've done something, not knowing that I understood the game he was trying to play with me. He's like, oh, no, 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 no. This is not, you did good. You did good. He basically rewarded me for basically psychological manipulation. He said, you did good. This one looks good, but there's another one. There's the original one. And he tried to describe it to me and explain it to me. There's green, light green, it's a little bit bigger. It's this. I was like, okay, no problem. Once I get the opportunity, I was going to go get it. I never did. So fast forward to a couple of years later, I graduated from elementary school and I headed to high school. High school was a couple of hours away, and the high school I went to, there were a lot of rich kids that their parents were who were the notable members of society in Nigeria. They came to the high school that I went to. The high school I went to was called the Grenadian Education Center, and a lot of prominent people's kids came to that school too. So going through school at first, I was still a sponge, soaking up knowledge, seeing what's going on, understanding. Fast forward to my second year into the school. So a friend of mine exposed me to a hustle that was pretty lucrative. And then I find out something quickly about human beings, right? Especially rich kids. The luxury that they're afforded in their homes, in the comfort of their families, around their mothers and their people that love them, they miss that so much that they're willing to compensate somebody that could give them a taste of that life home away from home. So in that case, it came in the form of something called Indomie noodles. So this it basically is an equivalent of something called the ramen noodles here in the United States. If you're in the United States, there's something called ramen noodles. So ramen noodles has basically a sister in Nigeria called Indomie noodles. So it's an instant noodles. It has the same thing. You open up, you put in hot water. It has a sachet you put in there. So a lot of kids preferred to eat that with sardines or corned beef and baked beans and stuff like that when they were home away from home, rather than they thought comparable when compared to the food that was served in the boarding school, that was better, that was more nutritious, that was something that brought them close to the kind of meal they would have at home somewhat, which is untrue kind of. But at the end of the day, they would pay handsomely for someone that could afford them get a taste of that. So I had friends, even I've had a family friend, which his side hustle was to bring this from home, found a way to smuggle it into the dormitory or into the hostels, and then he would hide it somewhere in his locker or somewhere. And then when after all is said and done, all students have checked in and the semester has started, evenings after school during the siesta period. Siesta is like when is a mandatory nap. Everybody has to take a nap for about an hour. So he would take a little bit at a time, put it in a bucket, put dirty clothes on top of it, and he would go around the hostel selling it to rich kids. So rich kids would buy it one at a time, two at a time, five at a time, six at a time, eight at a time, whatever. And I found out that he sold it for pretty good money. So let me give you an example of the kind of profit this guy was making. So basically, he would buy a whole box filled with 24. a pack of 24, and he will sell it for about, it was costing him about, let's say, 500 Nigerian money. And then by the time he's done selling it, he will be having somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 Nigerian money, which is Naira. So after a while, I thought to myself, this is something I could do. But my parents were so strict and they didn't want me getting into any trouble. I knew the kind of family I came from. I could not afford to give my dad any headache or my mom because they really work hard for everything they have. So, based on that principle, standing on that principle of being a headache free child, I decided to do it in school. So, I made friends with a guy. His name was Randy. I remember at the time. Shout out to Randy. And Randy would buy them for me, take them out of the box, and put them in a big bag. Like basically, take the ramen noodles or Indomie noodles out of the box, put it in a bag, fill it in a bag or bags, and then he would smuggle it into school. And then I'll take it to the hostel. So I would do that all through the semester. I would just keep flipping 500 bucks on 500 bucks and 500 bucks of a box. So a box used to cost me 500 bucks. So I would buy a box for 500 bucks and then I would flip it. By the time I'm done flipping it, I'll have somewhere between 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 Nigerian money. And then I would go back to Randy and give him $1,000 for two boxes. Then when I'm done selling, I'll give Randy some more money because I wouldn't give him all my money. I'll give him just as much as I could afford to lose, just in case he get caught. So at that point, I learned principles of money. Remember, I was this was self-taught. My parents didn't teach me this. This was something I watched somebody and I emulated a good behavior from somebody, even though it was considered illegal. It was contraband, but this was a good business model, right? So I kept doing it, and I found out that at the end of the semester, when most students were broke, right? I was going home with 5,000 Nigerian money. I was going back home with 5,000 naira. I was going home with decent money. I'm talking about the kind of money when I went home. I already learned how to drive at the age of 10. I could take my mom's car, get in to go pick up my friends, and I could afford to pay for dinner when we went to hang out, ice cream, whatever we were buying. I could afford to pay for that. And sometimes I could even afford to buy some clothes for myself. Not that I needed to. I didn't need to buy myself clothes, but it was just something, not being able to do something for yourself. It's just an apex of manhood, accomplishment. That's what men thrive off of. So I derived a huge sense of fulfillment just knowing that I could save myself. I could provide something for myself. I could do for self. So at that point, that was the biggest interaction I've had with money. My mom always just asked me, how do like she would always wonder how I had all this money. And then later in life, I explained to her what I was doing. She was like, wow, that was nice. And now that I think back on that experience, right? If I had the proper guidance, right, the best hustle would have been to basically build or rent a store around the school and have my family members just supply every contraband into the school or supply whatever it is that the rich kids were craving. It wasn't anything like crazy, it's just food. It's crazy how food is contraband. So they just wanted canned foods and Indomie and all this kind of stuff, just stuff they made, stuff they could easily get at home, right? I don't even think these rich kids will eat this at home. It's just like something that comes close, something they could quickly make. At home, they probably ate something way better, right? So at this point, I was thinking, like, if I could go back and do it again, I would just have one of my family members just move to that state, rent a store and just supply everything the students needed that was contraband or that they were willing to pay top dollar for. And the crazy thing that I found out was that the later in the semester that I waited, when most people run out of something called their provisions, like kids came to school with like cornflakes, they came with milk, they came with all kinds of stuff, like just stuff they could use to treat themselves outside of the food that the school supplied. When they ran out of those, the price the asking price of this Indomie noodles or ramen noodles skyrocketed because at this point it's all about supply and demand. Now the supply of food is very low, so the demand is very high for anything that was edible. So that was when I figured this out. I tend to towards the end of the semester I incorporated a different strategy in my business, in which towards the end of the semester, I went all in. Basically, I took all my money, give it to my buddy Randy, and Randy would even bring me more bags and bags of this Indomie noodles, which I kept flipping and flipping and flipping and making more money. But of course, they were, just like anything, there were hazards to the trade. There were people called house masters. These people could seize your contraband. You could get into trouble. You could be reported to the headmistress, to the principal, somebody. You could be written up. You could be taken to the assembly. You could embarrass, whatever. They could suspend you. There's so much that could go into it. So you have to be very, very careful. So we got divisive. We had ways to store this stuff. Sometimes we would, I'll stash my stuff somewhere else. I'll stash it in the classrooms in school, which was about 2 miles away, or sometimes I would keep it somewhere nobody would suspect under the lockers. Just found divisive ways to hide it away from everybody. But sometimes they would do random searches, and when they searched you and they grabbed your stash, just like any business, you lost your inventory, and now you have to eat that loss and then start all over again. So that was a very cool interaction with money. I remember at this point, like, we were Nigerian kids growing up, and we weren't even thinking about jobs. Like, we never had a job. We never had an experience with a job. Most our parents had money. Like, they were beginning. They got my parents. Our parents were at that age where they were beginning to see a significant amount of money. So they were basically doing investments, basically going into self enterprise. They were leaving the job route and going the business route. At that point, I remember my dad opened a restaurant, bought a taxi company, started a limo business, and he was doing a couple of. While my mom began her boutique business, she started selling women's clothes, jewelry, and all kinds of stuff. And she went into real estate, and on a very small scale, and so many other things. She was basically taking houses from rich people and helping them sell it to other rich people. So there was so much going on at that point. So it was hard for me because I never saw someone take a job as serious as I did when I came over to the United States. So I was used to people just getting involved in self enterprise, which is what built this country, the great United States. Self enterprise, people going into business for themselves. If you look around, the biggest companies in United States are all self enterprise. There was one man that thought about it and started it and took it all the way to the moon, right? So I graduated, and I tried different endeavors, or I attempted, but to no avail, because at this point Nigeria was pretty hammered economically. Making money was just not easy. You had to do so much to get in. The system was so corrupt. So basically, long story short, I graduated high school. I left Nigeria, and I came to United States. And then when I came here, um, I had to get a job. My dad told me, that I had to adapt to the American society. And my first job in the United States was working for one of my uncles as an he was an accountant, so I was his secretary. So it was a good experience. You know, it was a decent job. During taxes, I arranged receipts. This was back when things were still kind of analog before things went digital. I had all these business guys. I would arrange separate their tax, their receipts for their businesses, their expenditure, income, whatever it is. I would arrange the receipts, whatever it is, to food, gas, all kinds of stuff based on different tax deductions and all that kind of stuff. So went to that, did that, and that was my first experience working a job. Remember, I was coming from a background of business. I had an uncle that owned a transportation company. He owned a line of luxurious buses. I used to see this guy count like thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands and even into the millions. And he used to go buy buses that were worth like millions. And I used to see him carry cash all over the place. So I was used to people just self going into self enterprise. So the whole idea of a job was new to me. So remember, coming from that background where I hustled the ramen noodles or Indomie or whatever you might call it, I was already business minded. I loved doing that. But that affinity that I had for that was suppressed. So, for those of you listening and watching this broadcast right now, don't let anybody suppress that passion, that affinity you have for that thing. Keep thinking, how can you make this hustle better? How can you take this passion? How can you take this thing and make it bigger? Because here's the thing you're going to learn as you get older and you come into the real world. It boils down to one thing: people, customers are your boss. And if you serve them what they need, they will pay you for it. If you have what they want, they will pay you for it. It doesn't matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD. The richest people in the world are not PhD holders. They're not doctors. They're not lawyers. They're not none of these people. The richest people in the world are people that provided a service. They made people's lives better. They made people's lives simpler. They made people feel good. They did something to service the general populace. So if you can service the general population and make their life better, you are in business. You don't have to go through the whole route of schooling and stuff like that. Some of the greatest businessmen got their PhD and got their masters and doctorate and MBA from doing. They participated in the structure of society, in the capitalist system, and they figured it out. They found a formula that works and they ran with it, right? So now you ask me, which is more important? Is making money more important than a job? Definitely. Making money is what built some of the greatest nations in the world. A working a job is just a de facto mode. It's what people that don't have a plan for their life, or people that haven't figured it out at first, initially, that's what they do. Some people work a job, then figure out what they want to do, and then they go ahead and go into the route of making money. Let's take, for example, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, he worked a job. Even I heard he worked as low as McDonald's. And then he figured it out and left the job and went the route of making money. Today, making money is Jeff Bezos' one of his biggest hobbies. The man cannot help it. He cannot stop himself from making money, right? There's nobody that works for him that will ever be richer than him, at least not to my knowledge, at least not to the projection of the world's greatest economist. Nobody's projecting that anybody that works for Jeff Bezos is about to be richer than him. Won't happen. So for that to happen, they have to provide a service just like Jeff did. They have to provide a service that is very significant in size and magnitude, that people love it so much, to provide the equivalent in cash capital to that person that is the founder of the business. Because when you provide a service of such magnitude, people reward you with their money. That's the price they pay. People say, my money is less valuable than this service that you're offering. And because of that, they pay you handsomely, right? So at that point, when I sold those ramen noodles or Indomie noodles, the students were saying, this money is worth less than this noodles. This noodles is, I value it more than this money that I have. And I'm giving it to you, please, for this noodles. This noodles is worth more to me. So at a young age, you're gonna have so many encounter with money. And I'm not just talking about holding it and spending it. I'm talking about making it. You owe it to yourself to keep being divisive, keep being thoughtful, keep being insightful, keep playing with that mindset, that innate ability, that gift, that thing that tells you, wow, your intuition, that thing that tells you, wow, there's an opportunity here. We could exploit this. Exploit it, because there might be something there. Look at the kid that came up with Snapchat. Look what he did at such a young age. Don't let anybody tell you that there's a specific age you need to be rich. You can be a baby and be rich. You just need to psych yourself up. Do not buy into whatever it is that society tells you about money. Nobody knows it, because people come every day and defy the odds. You can defy the odds at the age of 5. You can defy the odds at the age of 10. You can defy the odds at the age of 15. I learned how to drive at the age of 10 in Africa. I'm not telling you to go learn how to drive at the age of 10. I did it under very safe conditions, under the supervision of adults. If you have that, sure, don't do it in public under adult supervision in a private property. Okay? So don't let anybody restrict your thinking and tell you that you have to become an adult. You have to be older than 18 to have your interaction with money, to have your day in the field with money. No. The first time you hold the dollar bill in your hand, your journey with money has started. Figure it out, learn money, learn how to, see it for the tool that it is, and use it to your advantage. Money is just a tool. It's nothing more than that. Other than that, it's useless. I need an iPhone. I want to buy an iPhone. I go to the store. Money is what I give them to get the iPhone. If there was something else, they will take it. If I went to the store and give them a gold bar and the manager authorized that, they will give me the iPhone. So you see, the paper money is not just as important, it's just symbolic. So once you understand what money is, you now have to play the game. You see, it says right there, life is a game. Play it. Life is a game. Play it. It's a money game. Money is a measure of all the good decisions a man or woman has made in life, right? So basically, that's why you see poor. When you see poor people, they don't have money because they've not made very good decisions with the little that they came across. And when you see rich people, they have a lot of money. I'm talking about people that made their money legitimately, right? They've made a lot of good decisions in life, and it's reflected in their bank account, in their investments, in equity, in things that they've acquired over a long period of time existing on this planet. And when some of them move along, they leave things to their family members in form of estates, things in their will, in form of cash money, and so many other things, jewelries and valuables. So my point of making this video is to let you know if making money is more important than a job, the answer is 100% yes. Making money and making money your hobby is way more valuable than having a job. If you can figure out the art of making money, the art of entrepreneurship, the art of being an industrialist, the art of providing services that make people's life better, if you can figure out how to live your life in service of others and providing them with things that they value in exchange for their money, if you can provide them with things that allow them to let you take their money, you are bound to be financially free very earlier on in life than most people. And what financial freedom does is not the end of life. It just enables you to free up time so that you could do more things in life that you're passionate about. All this education, all these going to medical school, pharmacy school, all these accolades, all these accumulation of knowledge and stuff like that. My dad always told me one thing: if it doesn't make money, it doesn't matter, right? He always said there were two things you don't fake in this life: having money and having knowledge. Because if you claim to be a doctor and you're on a plane, someone is having a heart attack, and you're asked to operate on that person, you wouldn't know what to do. You cannot fake it. And if you claim to be rich and your friends are going to the dealership to buy a Lamborghini and you claim that you can afford to buy one, when you get there, you cannot afford to do it because if you gave them a bank card or where would you get the money to pay? You cannot fake that. You cannot fake knowledge and you cannot fake having money. So financial freedom enables you to free up time so that you could live life or you could have a life worth living so that you could see this world planet for what it is, so you could see the best part of this planet and experience it to the optimum levels. That's what that financial freedom does to you. So to the average person, from the age of mental assimilation of the kind of knowledge that I'm passing through this medium, to something as early as 18, I would say build your acquaintance with cash money. Find out what you can do to become very proficient with credit, with money, any form of money, in any way it's presented, be it in form of credit, equity, cash, Bitcoin, crypto, any of these. If you are proficient in any of these at an early age, you basically have a head start over more than 80% of the population. You are bound to make it in life. Starting early is the key, and make sure nobody suppresses or tries to steal your dream. Because at the end of the day, no matter what accolade you have, if you don't have, if you're not resource rich, it's very hard to live a quality life. And that's what life is all about. You want to get married someday? You want to have a family? You want to live life into your prime years and see your grandchildren? As much as people would lie to you out there, money is a big factor in getting to experience all these things, right? And it goes further than that. So let's say you're the kind of person that does, you're not well rounded, you didn't have good experiences interacting with people that could teach you a thing or two about money. Having friends, good friends that could show you a thing or two about money is very, very handy. It comes in handy in life. Just having the people with the information, the kind of people that have a can do attitude, the people that will go do, people that you could emulate, you could look at them and get good examples and see what they're doing and do the same. That's it. A lot of people have become rich just as a byproduct of hanging out with other rich people. They just had to be within the close proximity to where the money activity is happening, and they just got rich. So think about it that way. So in summary, I want to say that making making money your hobby, and that will prepare you through life better than a job. And how do you make making money your hobby? Think of your ability to earn as an independent objective, something you have to figure out on your own. What can you do to humanity? That is the question. Figure out what you can do to humanity, how you can help humanity. Don't worry about what humanity can do for you. Ask yourself, what can you do for humanity? How can you help people? How can you make their life better? How can you make them feel better? How can you make them learn more? How can you make them more beautiful? How can you make them move faster? How can you help them save time? How can you help them become smarter? These are things and that are related to services that human beings seek after every day. How can you help them get in shape? How can you make them healthier? If you figure out a way to connect the service to one of these things, the universe will reward you abundantly with cash and money equity. And this is just as simple as that. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next video.